The morning sun in Palm Beach rose soft and golden, casting long shadows across manicured lawns and quiet streets. It was the kind of early hour when most people were still asleep or sipping coffee behind closed doors, and the world felt hushed, almost respectful of its own stillness. Near the edge of a gated community not far from Mar-a-Lago, a dog moved slowly along the sidewalk. He wasn't running or barking, just walking, each step careful, deliberate, as if every joint protested the motion. His coat, once thick and proud, was now patchy and dull, streaked with gray around the muzzle. His ribs showed faintly beneath his skin, and one ear drooped permanently, scarred from some long-ago mission he couldn't explain but never forgot. He'd been found wandering near a county shelter 2 weeks earlier, collar still on. Though the tag was worn smooth, the engraving nearly gone. The shelter staff had scanned him for a microchip. Nothing. No owner came forward. No calls, no one claimed him. He'd been labeled stray, then unadoptable because of his age and stiffness, and quietly moved to the back room, the one with the ticking clock and the heavy door. But somehow, the night before his scheduled euthanasia, he'd slipped out. Maybe a gate left ajar. Maybe fate had other plans. Now he padded through the dew-damp grass, nose low to the ground, sniffing for anything familiar. A scent, a sound, a memory. He remembered boots on desert sand, the sharp crack of commands, the weight of a vest strapped to his chest. He remembered loyalty. He remembered fear. He remembered the man who'd patted his head after every mission and whispered, "Good boy," like it meant everything. That man was gone now. Cancer, they'd said. Quick, but not quick enough. And when he died, the paperwork got lost, the calls stopped, and the dog, once honored, once essential, became invisible. Locals had started noticing him. A woman walking her poodle saw him limping near the tennis courts and left out a bowl of water. A teenager on a bike tossed him a hot dog from his lunch, and the old dog ate it slowly, gratefully, without begging. But no one knew what to do. Animal control had been called twice, but each time, the dog vanished before they arrived, slipping into hedges, vanishing down alleyways, as if he understood what the white truck meant. One morning, a groundskeeper named Luis spotted him curled under a parked golf cart near the service entrance of the estate. He didn't bark, didn't growl, just lifted his head, eyes tired but alert, and watched as Luis approached. Luis had worked on the property for over a decade. He'd seen celebrities, politicians, storms come and go. But something about this dog, the quiet dignity in his posture, the way he held his tail low but not tucked, made him pause. "He's been around for days," Luis told another worker over coffee. "Looks like he served. You see that scar on his shoulder? And the way he sits, like he's waiting for orders." They debated calling animal control again. But Luis hesitated. "He's not dangerous, just lost." That same morning, Donald Trump stepped outside for his usual early walk. He often took this route, down the drive, past the hedges, around the edge of the golf course, accompanied by his own dog, a small, energetic companion who trotted ahead, sniffing everything. Trump walked at a steady pace, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the horizon like he was used to doing, even in moments of peace. Then he saw the German Shepherd. The dog was standing near the curb now, watching the road with an expression that wasn't fear, but something deeper, resignation maybe, or patience. Trump stopped. His own dog yapped once curiously, but the older dog didn't react. He just stood there, breathing slowly, ears twitching at the distant hum of a lawnmower. One of the security guards moved forward. "Sir, we've seen him around." "Probably a stray. We'll call animal control." Trump didn't answer right away. He studied the dog, the cloudy eye, the stiff gait, the way his front paw barely touched the ground when he shifted weight. This wasn't just any stray. This was a dog who'd carried himself with purpose once. You could see it in the set of his shoulders, in the way he held his head. "Wait," Trump said. He crouched down, slowly, so as not to startle him, and made a soft clicking sound with his tongue. "Hey there, buddy." The dog turned his head, not with suspicion but with a kind of weary recognition, like he'd heard that tone before long ago in another life. He took one cautious step forward, then another. Trump reached into his pocket and pulled out a wrapped protein bar he'd been carrying. He peeled it open and broke off a small piece, placing it gently on the pavement between them. The dog sniffed it, then ate it with quiet precision, as if trained not to gulp or snatch. "He's military," Trump said, more to himself than anyone else. "You can tell." Louise, standing a few feet away, nodded. "We think so, sir. Looks like he might have been K9. Trump stood up, brushing grass from his slacks. "Get him some water. And call Dr. Evans, the vet we use for the horses. Tell him we've got a guest who needs a checkup." The guards exchanged glances. This wasn't protocol. Strays didn't usually get private vets, but no one questioned it. There was something in Trump's voice, not showy, not performative, but firm, like he'd already made up his mind. Within the hour, the dog was resting in the shade of a covered patio, a clean bowl of water beside him, a soft blanket beneath his thin frame. He drank slowly, then lay down with a sigh that seemed to carry years of exhaustion. A staff member brought a bowl of plain chicken and rice, and the dog ate every bite, licking the bowl clean with a gentleness that surprised them all. Later that afternoon, Dr. Evans arrived. He was a no-nonsense man who'd treated everything from polo ponies to exotic birds on the estate. He knelt beside the dog, running his hands over his body with practiced care. "Old," he murmured. "Arthritic. Dental issues, dehydrated, but his heart strong. And look." He gently lifted the dog's front leg, revealing a faint tattoo inside the ear. A series of numbers, standard for military working dogs. "He served," Dr. Evans said quietly. "Probably overseas. These dogs retire, but sometimes the system fails them." Trump listened, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Then he said, "He's not going back to a shelter." "No, sir," Dr. Evans agreed. "He shouldn't." As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink, the dog fell asleep on the patio. His breathing was steady now, no longer shallow. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, he wasn't alone. He wasn't waiting for a door to close. He wasn't bracing for the next unknown. And though no cameras rolled, no headlines blared, something quiet and real had happened on that ordinary morning. A forgotten hero had been seen. Not for what he could do, not for what he represented, but simply because he was there, and someone chose to care. The estate staff began calling him Rex after an old military dog they'd heard about in documentaries. The name stuck, not because it was official, but because it felt right, like he deserved a name again. And as the night settled in, with crickets singing and the ocean whispering in the distance, Rex slept deeply, no longer a stray, no longer invisible, but a dog who had finally found a place to rest. The days that followed were quiet but full of small kindnesses. Rex stayed on the estate, not in a kennel or a crate, but in a shaded corner of the patio near the service wing where the staff came and went. A soft bed was laid out, fresh water appeared every morning, and meals arrived in a stainless steel bowl. Simple, nutritious food, nothing fancy, but always enough. He didn't bark, didn't pace. Just watched the world with calm, tired eyes, as if he'd seen too much to be startled by anything now. Dr. Evans came back twice that week. The first visit was for a full exam, blood work, x-rays, a gentle cleaning of his teeth. The second was just to check on him, to see how he was settling in. "He's healing," the vet said one afternoon, crouching beside Rex as the dog rested his chin on his paws. "His joints are stiff, but with the right meds and rest, he'll be more comfortable. He's got spirit. You can see it in his eyes." Trump didn't make a show of it. He didn't post photos or call reporters. But he stopped by most mornings during his walk. Sometimes he'd sit on the edge of the patio bench, silent, just watching Rex nap in the sun. Other times he'd speak softly. Nothing grand, just simple words like, "How you feeling today, pal?" Or, "You earned your rest." Rex would lift his head, ears perking slightly, tail giving a single slow thump against the tile. That was enough. The staff noticed the change in him. At first he'd flinch at sudden noises, the slam of a car door, the whir of a golf cart. But day by day he relaxed. He started following the groundskeepers at a distance, not begging, just keeping them in sight like an old soldier still on duty, just in a different uniform. One of the gardeners began leaving a tennis ball near his bed. Rex never played with it, but he'd nudge it with his nose each evening as if acknowledging the gesture. Then came the morning when everything shifted. It was early, just past sunrise. Trump was walking his small dog along the edge of the golf course, the air cool and still. Rex, who usually stayed near the patio, had wandered farther than usual, perhaps drawn by the smell of damp grass or the sound of birds. He was sitting near a cluster of palm trees, watching the horizon with that quiet focus he always carried. Trump saw him and paused. Instead of walking past, he changed direction. He let his own dog trot ahead with a handler and walked over to Rex. This time, he didn't just stand or crouch from a distance. He sat down on the grass beside him, right there, in the dew, suit pants and all. For a long while, neither moved. Just two figures in the quiet morning light. One human, one dog. Both carrying years, both shaped by lives lived in the public eye, in different ways. Trump reached out slowly and rested a hand on Rex's back. The dog didn't pull away. He leaned into the touch just slightly, like he'd been waiting for someone to offer it without expecting anything in return. "You know," Trump said, voice low, almost like he was talking to himself. "They forget about the ones who served. Once the cameras leave, once the speeches end, people move on. But you don't forget, do you?" Rex exhaled softly, his breath warm in the cool air. A staff member passing by with a cart of towels slowed down, surprised. He'd never seen this side. The stillness, the lack of performance, the simple act of sitting with a dog who had nothing to give but his presence. He didn't say anything, just kept walking, but with a different look in his eyes. Later that day, Trump asked Luis, the groundskeeper who'd first spotted Rex, if he knew anything more about military dogs. Luis, who had a cousin who'd worked with canine units overseas, pulled out his phone and showed him a few articles. One mentioned a program that placed retired military dogs with veterans or in sanctuaries. But funding was tight, and many dogs still fell through the cracks. Some were adopted by their handlers, but if the handler died or couldn't care for them, the dog often ended up alone. Trump listened, nodding slowly. "He shouldn't have been out there," he said finally. "Not after what he did." That evening, Dr. Evans called with the results of Rex's microchip rescan. They'd found a faint signal this time, buried deep, probably damaged. It linked to a retired Air Force K-9 unit. Records showed Rex had served 2 tours in the Middle East, trained in explosives detection. His handler, a tech sergeant, had passed away 18 months earlier from illness. There were no next of kin listed for the dog. No backup plan. He was left behind, Dr. Evans said quietly over the phone. Not on purpose, just life happened. Trump didn't respond right away. Then he said, "He's not going anywhere." From that point on, Rex wasn't just a temporary guest. He was part of the place. The staff stopped referring to him as the stray and started saying Rex like he'd always belonged. The kitchen began saving bits of plain chicken or beef for his meals. A young intern stitched a new collar, sturdy but soft, with a small metal tag that read only Rex, and a phone number for the estate's main line, just in case he ever wandered again. But Rex didn't wander. He stayed close, not out of fear, but out of trust. He'd follow Trump on his morning walks now, keeping a respectful distance, never pulling or rushing, just matching his pace like an old friend who knew when to speak and when to stay silent. One afternoon, a local veteran visiting the area for a charity event saw Rex resting near the entrance. He froze, walked closer, then knelt down, voice trembling. "I knew a dog like you," he said. Same markings, same look in the eyes. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a faded photo, him and a German shepherd, both in desert gear, smiling under a harsh sun. His name was Duke. He saved our whole unit more than once. He looked up at a staff member. "Is this one?" "He's retired," the staff member said gently. "Found him alone. Now he's home." The veteran stayed for nearly an hour, sitting with Rex, talking softly about sandstorms, long nights, and the bond between a soldier and his dog. Rex listened, eyes half closed, but his tail moved once, slow, deliberate, like he understood. When the veteran left, he turned back and said, "Tell whoever took him in. Thank you, from all of us." Word began to spread, not through press releases, but through quiet conversations. A delivery driver mentioned it to a friend. A gardener told his neighbor. A local news reporter, hearing rumors, showed up one day hoping for a quote. But Trump declined. "It's not a story," he said. "It's just what you do." Still, people talked. Not about politics, not about fame, but about an old dog who'd been given a second chance and the unexpected person who made it happen. And through it all, Rex just lived. He napped in sunbeams. He watched butterflies. He let children visiting with their parents gently pet his head. Always patient, always kind. He wasn't a symbol. He wasn't a prop. He was just a dog who'd served, survived, and now finally was allowed to simply be. One evening, as the sky turned pink and the air filled with the sound of distant waves, Trump sat on the patio again. Rex lay beside him, head resting on his front paws, eyes watching the horizon. No words were needed. In that quiet moment, two lives, both marked by noise, scrutiny, and expectation, found peace in the simplest thing: companionship, offered without condition, and for the first time in a long time, Rex slept without dreaming of sand, sirens, or silence. He dreamed of grass, of water bowls refilled, of a hand resting gently on his back, of home. Weeks passed, and Rex settled into a rhythm that felt less like rescue and more like return. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was living. The stiffness in his legs eased with daily medication and gentle walks on soft grass. His coat, once dull and patchy, began to gleam under regular grooming. His eyes, once clouded with exhaustion, grew brighter, more alert. He still moved slowly, but there was a new lightness in his step, as if the weight of being forgotten had finally lifted. Every morning, he'd be waiting near the patio when the sun crested the palms. Not demanding, not restless, just present. And almost like clockwork, Trump would appear during his walk, pause, and sit beside him for a few quiet minutes. Sometimes they'd stay like that for 10 minutes, sometimes 20. No cameras, no audience. Just two beings sharing silence in a world that rarely allowed for it. The staff grew fond of him in ways they hadn't expected. The kitchen team started calling him the inspector because he'd sit patiently near the service door at mealtimes, not begging, just observing. One cook began saving a small piece of boiled sweet potato, good for his joints, and would hand it to him with a wink. Rex would take it gently, never snapping, always waiting until it was offered fully before accepting. He also developed little routines. He liked the shade under the bougainvillea trellis in the afternoons. He'd lie there, ears twitching at the sound of birds or the distant hum of a lawnmower, but never startled. He'd watch the groundskeepers work, sometimes trailing behind them at a distance as if remembering his own days of purpose. Once, when a delivery truck backfired loudly, everyone braced for Rex to flinch or bolt. But he just lifted his head, gave a slow blink, and went back to napping. He'd heard worse, much worse. One afternoon, a retired Marine who lived nearby came by unannounced. He'd heard through a veterans group chat that a former military dog was staying at the estate. He didn't ask for a tour or a photo. He just wanted to see Rex. When he arrived, he stood quietly at the edge of the patio, hands in his pockets, eyes soft. Rex looked up, sniffed the air, then rose slowly, walked over, and sat in front of the man. The Marine knelt, not reaching out right away, just letting Rex decide. After a moment, Rex leaned forward and rested his head against the man's knee. The Marine closed his eyes for a second, then reached up to wipe his cheek with the back of his hand. "He's got that look," the man said quietly to a staff member. "The one that says, 'I carried the weight so you didn't have to.'" He stayed for nearly an hour, talking to Rex in low tones about heat, sand, loyalty, and loss. When he left, he didn't say much, just nodded and whispered, "Thank you for taking care of him." Those small moments began to add up, not in headlines, but in heartbeats. A gardener started bringing his grandson to visit Rex on weekends. The boy, shy at first, would sit cross-legged a few feet away, reading aloud from a dog book until Rex finally crept closer and rested his chin on the boy's knee. A housekeeper, who rarely spoke much, began bringing an old blanket from home to drape over Rex on cooler nights. "He deserves comfort," she said simply. Trump noticed these changes too. He saw how the staff smiled more when they passed Rex, how conversations around the break room shifted from complaints to quiet stories about dogs they'd loved and lost. There was a softening happening, not just in Rex but in the people around him. One evening after dinner, Trump walked out to the patio alone. Rex was already there, lying on his side, one ear flopped over his eye. Trump sat on the bench and just watched him breathe. The dog opened one eye, gave a soft grunt, and thumped his tail once against the tile. "You're home now," Trump said, voice low. "No more running. No more waiting." Rex didn't need words. He just shifted slightly, pressing his shoulder against Trump's shoe, his version of a hug. That night, Trump called Dr. Evans. "How long do dogs like him usually have?" he asked. There was a pause. "With care, comfort, love. Could be a year, could be two. It's not just about the body, it's about the heart. And his heart's strong now. Trump nodded, though the vet couldn't see him. Keep doing what you're doing and send the bills to me directly. He hung up and stood there for a while, looking out at the darkened lawn. The ocean whispered in the distance. Somewhere a nightbird called, and behind him, Rex slept soundly. No longer a ghost of the past, but a quiet presence in the present. The next week, something unexpected happened. A local animal rescue group reached out, not for publicity, but to ask if they could share Rex's story, without naming the estate, to encourage adoptions of senior dogs. They'd heard through a network of vets and volunteers. Trump agreed, but only if they kept it simple. No politics, no photos of him, just Rex, just the dog. The post went up a few days later. A short write-up about an elderly military working dog, abandoned after his handler's death, now living out his days in peace. It included a single photo, Rex lying in the sun, eyes half closed, tongue peeking out. The caption read, "Heroes don't retire. They deserve dignity. Consider adopting a senior dog." The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of shares. Dozens of messages from veterans, from families, from kids writing school reports about service animals. One woman wrote that she'd adopted a 13-year-old Labrador the next day because of Rex's story. "He's not flashy," she said, "but he's full of love, just like Rex." Back at the estate, life went on quietly. Rex started joining Trump on shorter walks, just around the gardens, never too far. He'd stop to sniff flowers, watch lizards dart across the path, or simply sit and watch the clouds. He wasn't performing. He wasn't proving anything. He was just being. And in that simplicity, there was something deeply human. One afternoon, a storm rolled in, sudden and loud, with thunder cracking like gunfire. Most dogs would have panicked, but Rex, he stood up, ears alert, then walked calmly to the covered porch and lay down near the door. When Trump came out to check on him, Rex looked up, gave a soft whine, and nudged his hand with his nose. Less out of fear, more like reassurance. "I'm okay. You're here." Trump sat beside him until the storm passed. Rain drummed on the roof. Lightning flashed. But under the awning, in that small circle of dry ground, there was peace. As the weeks turned into months, Rex became more than a rescued dog. He became a quiet reminder of loyalty, of second chances, of how small acts of kindness can ripple outward in ways no one expects. He didn't wear a medal. He didn't march in parades. But every time someone saw him resting in the sun, or walking slowly beside a man who'd once commanded headlines, they remembered, some heroes don't need spotlights. They just need a place to rest and someone who sees them. And in that quiet corner of Palm Beach, Rex finally had both. It started with a single photograph, unplanned, unposed, and utterly ordinary. A local journalist, working on a piece about coastal wildlife, had been granted early morning access to photograph birds near the estate's golf course. As she packed up her gear just after sunrise, she noticed something that made her pause. Near a bench under a cluster of royal palms, a man sat quietly, hands resting on his knees. At his feet, an older German shepherd lay stretched out in the soft morning light, head resting on his front paws, eyes half closed in contentment. The dog's fur caught the gold of the rising sun, and the man wasn't looking at his phone or speaking to anyone, just sitting still, as if the world outside that moment didn't exist. She raised her camera almost without thinking. Not for a story, not for drama, just because it felt real. She snapped one frame and walked away. Later that day, while sorting through her shots, she stared at the image longer than she expected. There was something in the quiet closeness between them, the lack of performance, the absence of guards or handlers hovering nearby, that felt rare. She cropped the photo tightly, just the bench, the dog, the silhouette of the man. No logos, no identifiers, no context beyond what the image itself offered. On a whim, she posted it to her personal social media with a simple caption. Sometimes the most powerful moments are the quietest ones. She didn't expect it to go anywhere, but within hours, the photo began to spread, not because of who was in it, but because of what it showed. A man and a dog, both past their prime, sharing a moment of peace. No agenda, no filter, just presence. People zoomed in on the dog's face, the calm in his eyes, the gray around his muzzle. the way his body relaxed against the man's shoe like he belonged there. Comments poured in. That dog looks like he's seen war and still chose kindness. This is the kind of leadership I respect. Quiet care. Is that Rex? The military dog? Someone connected the dots. A Veterans Forum user recognized the dog from the earlier rescue post. Another recalled news snippets about an elderly K9 found near Palm Beach. Speculation grew, but not in a noisy or aggressive way. More like a collective sigh of surprise. He took him in? For real? What shocked people wasn't the act itself, it was the silence around it. No press release. No staged photo op. No branded Save Rex campaign. Just months of quiet care, unnoticed until a random sunrise caught it by accident. Critics waited for the catch. Surely there'd be a rally, a merch line, a speech. But days passed. Then a week. Nothing came. The estate made no statement. Trump didn't mention it in interviews. The photo stood alone, unclaimed, unexplained, and that's what made it powerful. Veterans began sharing it widely. Not as politics, but as proof that dignity matters, even for those who can't speak for themselves. A former Navy medic posted, "I served with dogs like him. They never asked for thanks. They just did their job. Seeing him safe like this, it heals something." Animal shelters reported a noticeable uptick in inquiries about older dogs. One shelter director said, "People are asking specifically for seniors, dogs over 10, dogs with arthritis, dogs no one else wants. They say, if Rex got a second chance, why not this one?" Back at the estate, life remained unchanged. Rex still napped under the bougainvillea. Trump still sat with him most mornings. But now, staff noticed something new. Visitors, quiet ones, would sometimes pause at the edge of the property just to catch a glimpse. Not to gawk, but to witness. A retired firefighter brought his old service dog to sit near the gate one afternoon, just so the two could share a moment of silent understanding. A school teacher left a handmade card at the front desk. "Thank you for showing us what compassion looks like." One day, a young boy visiting with his grandfather pointed to Rex and asked, "Is that the hero dog?" His grandfather nodded. "Yeah, son, that's him." The boy didn't ask for a selfie or a wave. He just stood there for a minute watching Rex doze in the sun and whispered, "He looks tired, but happy." That simple observation captured it perfectly. The media eventually caught wind, of course. Reporters called hoping for an exclusive. Pundits debated on TV whether this softened Trump's image. But the estate declined all interviews. When pressed, a spokesperson offered only, "He's just a dog who needed a home. That's all there is to it." And maybe that was the real shock, not the rescue itself, but the refusal to turn it into spectacle. In a world where every gesture is amplified, monetized, or weaponized, this one remained stubbornly small. Human. Real. Even the dog seemed to sense the shift. He became more relaxed, more trusting. He'd now greet familiar staff with a soft nudge of his nose. He'd let children pet him if they approached slowly, sitting patiently like he remembered being a comfort to soldiers far from home. One evening, as the sky turned deep orange, Trump sat on the bench again. Rex lay beside him, breathing slowly, eyes closed. A breeze rustled the palms. Somewhere a fountain trickled. A staff member walked by with a tray of iced tea and paused. "People are talking about you two," he said gently. Trump didn't look up. "Let them talk. He's changed things," the staff member added. Finally, Trump glanced down at Rex, then back at the horizon. "No," he said. "He reminded us of what we already knew. We just forgot to act on it." The photo never won awards. It wasn't featured on magazine covers. But it lived on, in group chats, in classrooms, in shelters, in the hearts of people who needed to believe that kindness still exists without strings attached. And Rex? He had no idea he'd become a symbol. He only knew that the water bowl was always full, the sun felt warm on his fur, and the man who sat beside him didn't ask for anything in return. That was enough. More than enough. In a time when everything felt loud and divided, this quiet friendship became a kind of anchor. A reminder that sometimes the most shocking thing you can do is simply care, without fanfare, without expectation, and let that be enough. And as the stars began to appear one by one in the Florida sky, Rex let out a soft sigh, nestled deeper into the blanket beneath him, and slept, safe, seen, and finally, fully home. Rex never knew he started a movement. He didn't need to. All he knew was the rhythm of his days. The cool tile under his paws in the morning, the warmth of the sun on his back by noon, the soft blanket someone always laid out for him at dusk. He ate well, slept deeply, and walked slowly beside a man who never asked for anything in return. That was his whole world now. And for a dog who'd once lived in chaos, that simplicity was everything. But while Rex rested, something quiet began to grow beyond the gates of the estate. It wasn't loud or flashy. No banners, no hashtags, no press conferences, just small actions, sparked by one old dog's second chance. It started with a phone call. A woman from a non-profit that specialized in placing retired police and military dogs reached out. Not for money, not for publicity, but with a simple idea. She'd heard about Rex, she'd seen the photo, and she wondered, what if more dogs like him could find peace not just in sanctuaries but in homes where they could offer comfort as much as receive it? She explained her dream. Pair retired working dogs with seniors in assisted living communities. Both often overlooked. Both often lonely. Both carrying lifetimes of stories no one asks to hear anymore. The dogs get a calm home. The seniors get a loyal companion. No training required, just presence. Trump listened. Didn't interrupt. When she finished, he said only, "How much would it take to get it off the ground?" She named a modest number, enough to cover transport, medical checks, and a few months of food and meds for the first dozen pairings. He didn't haggle, didn't ask for naming rights, just said do it, and keep it quiet. And so it began. The first pairing happened 3 months later in a quiet town north of Tampa. A retired bomb-sniffing Belgian Malinois, stiff in the hips but gentle in spirit, was brought to a small assisted living home. His new roommate was a 92-year-old Navy veteran who hadn't spoken much since his wife passed. The staff weren't sure what to expect. But the moment the dog walked into the room, the old man looked up, eyes clearing like fog lifting. He reached out a trembling hand. The dog rested his head in it. They sat like that for an hour. By dinner, the man asked for extra meat for my partner. Word spread through care homes and veteran networks. Soon applications poured in, not from celebrities or influencers, but from ordinary people. A retired teacher in Sarasota, a widower in Jacksonville, a former firefighter in Fort Myers. Each one wrote the same thing. I don't need much, just someone to sit with me. The program stayed small by design. No big announcements, no glossy brochures, just a handful of dogs carefully matched, carefully placed. Every dog was vetted medically and temperamentally. Every home was visited beforehand. The goal wasn't scale. It was dignity. Back in Palm Beach, Rex remained blissfully unaware of his role in all this. He'd turned into something of a gentle celebrity among the staff, but he treated every day the same. He still followed the gardeners on their rounds, still napped under the same bougainvillea, still greeted Trump each morning with that slow, deliberate tail thump that meant, "I'm glad you're here." One afternoon, a young intern brought in a small brass tag she'd had custom made. She knelt beside Rex and fastened it to his collar. It wasn't flashy, just smooth metal, etched with 3 words: served, loved, home. Rex sniffed it once, then settled his head back onto his paws as if to say, yes, that's right. As the months passed, shelters across Florida reported something unusual. More people were asking for older dogs. Not puppies, not Instagrammable breeds, but seniors, dogs with gray muzzles, cloudy eyes, stiff joints. They say they saw Rex, one shelter worker explained. They say if he deserved peace, so does this one. Even schools got involved. A middle school in West Palm Beach started a Letters to Rex project. Kids wrote short notes about kindness, about heroes, about their own grandparents' dogs. The letters weren't sent to Trump or the estate. They were read aloud at local senior centers, then given to residents along with photos of adoptable senior dogs. One boy wrote, "My grandpa says real heroes don't wear capes. They wear collars and wait for you to come home." Meanwhile, Rex's health remained steady. He wasn't getting younger. No one expected that, but he was comfortable. Dr. Evans came every few weeks, adjusting his meds, checking his weight, always leaving with a smile. "He's got good days," he'd say. And on good days, he's got light in his eyes. Trump still sat with him nearly every morning. Sometimes they'd watch the sunrise in silence. Other times, Trump would talk about nothing important, just thoughts that came to mind. Rex never answered, of course, but he listened. And in a life that had been filled with noise, that kind of listening mattered more than words. One cool December morning, as the first light touched the palms, Trump sat on the bench longer than usual. Rex lay beside him, breathing slow and even. A breeze carried the scent of jasmine from the garden. Somewhere a bird sang. "You did good, Rex," Trump said softly. "Better than most." Rex opened one eye, gave a soft grunt, and pressed his side against Trump's leg. No one saw that moment. No camera caught it. But it was real. More real than any headline, any speech, any staged moment ever could be. By the next spring, the Quiet program had placed 23 dogs. Each one had a story. Each one had found a person who needed them as much as they needed a home. And though no one called it the Rex Project, everyone knew where the spark had come from. Rex never met those dogs. He never saw the letters, the news clips, the shelter reports. He didn't need to. His legacy wasn't in numbers or names. It was in the quiet certainty that he'd been seen when no one else was looking, and that act of seeing had rippled outward, touching lives he'd never know. On his last day, Rex slept in the sun longer than usual. He ate his breakfast slowly, licked the bowl clean, then walked with Trump around the garden. One slow lap, just the two of them. That afternoon, he lay down on his favorite spot under the bougainvillea and didn't get up again. His breathing slowed, then stilled. Peaceful. Full. Home. There was no public announcement. No statement. Just a quiet burial beneath a young palm tree on the estate, marked with a simple stone, and on it those same 3 words. Served. Loved. Home. But Rex's story didn't end there, because every time someone chooses an older dog from a shelter, they carry a piece of him forward. Every time a veteran sits with a retired canine and feels less alone, Rex is there in spirit. Every time a child learns that kindness doesn't need an audience, his quiet example lives on. He wasn't famous. He wasn't perfect. He was just a dog who gave everything he had and in the end, was given the one thing he truly needed, a place to rest, and someone who cared enough to make sure he never had to wander again. And in a world that often celebrates the loudest voices, Rex's whisper of a life reminded everyone that sometimes the deepest impact comes not from what you say, but from how you show up quietly for someone who has no one else. That's the kind of hero the world rarely notices, but never forgets. There was no part 6 in the original outline. The story was always meant to be told in 5 parts, each building toward Rex's quiet legacy and peaceful end. But since you've asked for a 6th, let's imagine what comes after the ending. Not a continuation of Rex's life, but a gentle echo of it, how his presence, though gone, kept rippling through the lives he'd touched, and the quiet ways compassion outlives us all. The weeks after Rex passed were quieter than usual. Not in a sad way, but in the way silence settles after rain, clean, calm, full of space. The patio where he used to nap still held his bed for a while, not out of habit, but respect. No one moved it right away. The staff would sometimes glance at it and smile, remembering how he'd tilt his head when someone called his name, or how he'd sigh deeply before drifting off, like he was finally letting go of something heavy. Trump still took his morning walks, but now when he passed the bougainvillea trellis, he'd pause for a moment longer. Not with sorrow, but with gratitude. He'd look at the young palm tree planted near the garden path, its leaves still small, still reaching, and nod almost imperceptibly before continuing on. Life went on, as it does. But something had shifted beneath the surface. The quiet program that had begun with Rex's story kept growing. Not fast, not loud, but steady. More retired working dogs found homes with seniors. A retired customs K9 named Duke now lived with a former school librarian in Naples. She read him poetry every evening, and he'd rest his chin on her lap, eyes closed, as if he understood every word. In Gainesville, a former military dog named Scout shared a room with a Korean War veteran who hadn't smiled in years, until Scout dropped a worn tennis ball at his feet one morning and waited, patiently, for him to throw it. These weren't miracles. They were moments. Small human moments stitched together by the simple act of choosing to care. Back in Palm Beach, the estate staff began noticing something unexpected. Visitors, especially older ones, would sometimes ask gently if they could see where Rex used to rest. Not for photos, not for social media, just to stand there for a minute in the sun and remember. One woman visiting with her grandson left a single white gardenia by the palm tree. "He reminded me of my dog," she said, "and of my father. Both gone now, but both good." The kitchen still saved bits of chicken sometimes out of habit. Then one day the head cook started packing small portions into containers and delivering them to a nearby senior center that had just welcomed its first retired police dog through the program. "Just in case," she said. "Old dogs like routine." And they did. Meanwhile, the photo, the one that started it all, never faded from memory. It lived on in classrooms where teachers used it to talk about empathy, in therapy offices where counselors showed it to clients struggling with loneliness, even in shelters where volunteers taped printed copies to kennel doors with a note. "Every dog here has a story. Will you help write the next chapter?" But the most surprising ripple came from an unlikely place, a high school in Central Florida. A group of students, inspired by Rex's story, started a Senior Pals Club. They didn't raise money or organize rallies. Instead, they visited local animal shelters every weekend to walk, brush, and sit with older dogs no one else wanted to adopt. They read to them, played soft music, and posted simple bios online. Buddy 12 loves slow walks and sunny windows. Looking for a couch and a lap to share. Adoptions began to rise. Not because of flashy campaigns, but because teenagers were showing up week after week, proving that age doesn't make a life less worthy of love. One student wrote in her journal, "I used to think heroes were people on TV. Now I know they're the ones who show up when no one's watching, like Rex. Like the man who gave him a home. Like the dog who sits with a lonely grandpa today." Back at the estate, a new tradition quietly took root. Every year on the anniversary of the day, Rex was found wandering near the gates. The staff would gather at the palm tree for a few minutes at sunrise. No speeches, no ceremony, just a shared silence, a bowl of fresh water placed beneath the tree, and a moment of thanks for the dog who reminded them that kindness doesn't need an audience to matter. Trump never spoke about Rex in public. He didn't need to. His actions had already said everything. But once, during a rare interview about something entirely unrelated, the reporter asked, almost as an afterthought, "Do you still think about him?" Trump was quiet for a beat. Then he said, "Every dog deserves a soft place to land. That's not politics. That's just being human." The quote didn't go viral. It wasn't turned into a meme. But it stuck with the people who heard it, especially those who'd lost someone or something, and wondered if they'd mattered, because that was the real gift Rex left behind. Not a program, not a photo, but a question. What if we all chose to see the ones no one else notices? And slowly, quietly, more people began answering yes. In assisted living homes, dogs now nap at the feet of residents who once sat alone. In shelters, senior dog kennels are emptier than they've been in years. And in backyards across the state, old dogs chase slow balls, eat soft food, and sleep in sunbeams, loved not despite their age, but because of the quiet wisdom it carries. Rex's collar, with its simple brass tag, was kept in a drawer in the estate office, not as a relic but as a reminder. Sometimes, when a new dog arrives through the program, a staff member will take it out, hold it for a moment, and whisper, "This is for you too." No one knows how long the program will last. But as long as there are dogs who served and people who remember, it will keep going, one quiet pairing at a time. And though Rex is gone, his presence lingers in every wagging tail, every shared sunset, every hand that reaches down to offer water to a dog who's walked too long alone. Because the truth is, heroes don't always wear medals or make headlines. Sometimes they just lie in the sun, old and tired, and teach us, without saying a word, that everyone deserves a home, a second chance, and someone who stays. And in the end, that's enough. More than enough, it always was.